Hello, my wonderful friends. Sally the Seeker here. I hope you all are doing well. Well, I just want to let you know I have been trying to work on this case, the boy in the box, Florida versus Timothy Ferriter, for weeks. And I've had a lot of challenges with YouTube. I'm not sure what it is. I didn't ever publish the prior video that I was going to publish, but they'll run a check before you publish it and say, I don't know, since I am finally monetized, thank you all for that. You get a little extra money, for the ads and all that. But they were saying that the ads wouldn't play, and sometimes I'm okay with that if it's something I really, feel passionate about. But I'm not. I did not understand why that it wouldn't fit, because I've done other things that I think would have been more, I don't know, more making them want to take a second look at it. But I just decided to be cautious and start from scratch. And he and his wife, Tracy, let me see. So yes, Timothy is there. Wife, Tracy, oops, she's kind of hidden by this other attorney of his, but you'll see her, Tracy Ferriter, there. They were arrested on February 8th of 2022 because there were suspicions that they were keeping one of their children. I guess they would want to say maybe false imprisonment, and maybe they would consider it child abuse because there was an 8-by-8-foot structure in their 2-car garage where it appears the boy resided most of the time, their son. So, and it sounds like it's maybe been going on for years. And I will provide more information with you via video clips and all that can tell it better than me. But I just want to give you the basics of this. And as of now, I'm running this. This was taken. This is the same day the jury actually deliberated and came up with their verdict for Timothy Ferriter. But he was found guilty of aggravated child abuse, false imprisonment, and neglect. And it's been very interesting because from what my understanding is, he was not expecting to be found guilty of these charges. And after you hear things and hear the videos and testimonies, you're like, why would he not think he could get by on what he did unless he's just somebody who is not used to getting in trouble for stuff? Because Timothy and Tracy Ferriter, they lived in Jupiter Beach, Florida. It's in South Florida. It's a suburb of West Palm Beach. It's a very affluent area. So they I don't know, maybe they are now wealthy from my understanding. I mean, if you look at him, you can see he has his perfect suit and his hair with his product in it. And so it's interesting why they would build a structure. I know that this son, who's now 16, had a mental disorder, which did cause a lot of angst and pressure, which I understand. I guess the thing that frustrates me or makes me want to know why, I guess I want to question. I have questions is what I want to say. I have questions of why it seems like they had the means. What could they have done differently? I mean, could they have had a person come in there and help with him? I don't know. I'm just speculating right now. But the main thing is, so he's going to be sentenced on November 16th. Now, the wife, Tracy Ferriter, also has a trial coming up, and she will be charged with the same things. And it would be interesting to note that prior to this trial coming up, he was offered and refused what I think might have been a pretty sweet plea deal that he would go 2 years in prison and have 5 years of probation, because what he's charged with and now he's been found guilty of, he could spend up to 40 years in prison. That's probably not going to happen, but I still think whatever it's going to be is going to be more than the 2 years and a 5-year probation thing. He did not testify, which I understand that makes sense. I mean, they usually say they shouldn't, they don't have to testify. There's no reason to, and usually it makes their case worse to testify. But me, if I were a juror, if I can say it correctly, and just me, myself, who is always filled with questions and always wants to know why, I guess because of, and maybe y'all will see this, how stoic he is through this whole trial, he was very hard to read. So I would have been interested to see him get on the stand and explain and say, well, maybe I made a mistake, but we were desperate. This child was giving us a hard time. Family members, we didn't feel safe, all this kind of stuff. But, you just never really know, because like I said, he doesn't show expression. When his son testified in person, the one that they had falsely imprisoned, and there's a daughter who testified via satellite, and you just didn't see him really showing any emotion. And he was taking copious notes, and he just seemed kind of cold to me just by looking at him. I'm not saying that he is. I can't know for sure, and I wasn't very impressed by Tracy's appearance either. But that's how it goes. But so they were on I would think it was $50,000 bond when they were arrested back in February 2022. So they were able to pay that. So they did not have to stay in jail until their trial date came up. So I don't think they had any prior crimes. So clearly they weren't career criminals. But when the jury found him guilty, they went ahead and put the boy in cuffs and took him out and took him to jail. Now, the defense did try to argue for him to be released until sentencing. That I'll share all of that, but the judge denied it, and they did show how a week's time in jail wore on him, because he had stubble and he just looked really rough, and they said he was trembling. I'll have to look closer. I'll share that video with you. And so he was really shaken up, because I don't think he thought this was going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how the trial, which I probably already said for Tracy when the date is set, which it has not been yet, how things go for her. And from my understanding, it has been suggested that Tracy will probably be offered a deal for less time, but she would probably basically have to throw Timothy under the bus and claim or say that everything was his idea and she didn't have a choice in the decision making, that kind of thing. But whether she will do that or not, it's hard to say. It looks to me like, I'm just saying for me, that they're pretty in love with each other, even though their 4 children that they have are with the state. I don't know if any of them are with family members at this time. I don't know, but it's just to me, it's a sad case if you look at it, and I'm not sure what in the world they were thinking. Again, that's my opinion. And also, I want to say, if you're new here, and even if you're not, welcome. I'm always happy to have you here. I'm very rough around the edges as far as my technical abilities and my reporting abilities, whatever you want to call it. I am a commenter. I react to crime videos, but I am not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a lawyer. I'm just a person who's very interested in court cases and the foolishness that people do to get themselves in trouble. And that's it. I'm just somebody with an opinion. With that being said, it's always important to do your own research. I do work really hard in my research, but to try to bring you as much of the facts as I can, but I'm sure I will fall short. But that's why it's important to do your own research. Okay, now I got that done with. So I am going to, I think now, show you the opening statements of the prosecution and the defense, so that might give you a little better idea of what they were, I guess you could say, in this case, what their arguments were for and against Timothy Ferriter. Okay, now we come to the part of the opening statements. First, beginning with the prosecution. Like I said, I always like to just look at their faces and see. I'm not a body language expert either, but just to see what I think they might be feeling or thinking. Okay, here we go. Take a deep breath.
Over the course of this week, you're going to hear a lot and get to know a lot about the life of, he goes by, and today he is 16 years old. But
something else I wanted to point out. During this, you're going to hear parts where it's kind of bleeped out and there's going to be pauses and breaks. It's because they are stating the names of the children who are minors, so for their privacy. So that's why it's going to sound a little jacked up.
But this case starts, and really the focus of what his life was like is how his life was in end of December 2021 and January of 2022, when he was just 14 years old. This morning, you're going to learn that on January 28th, 2022, he ran away from home. He lived in Jupiter, Florida at that time with his parents, the defendant, Tim Ferriter, and his mom, Tracy Ferriter. You're going to hear that he was adopted as a child, as a small child, a toddler age, from Vietnam, and he had lived with the Ferriters since that time. He was the second of their 4 children. He has an older sister named, who you're also going to get to hear from during this trial, a younger sister named, and a much younger little brother named, who was about 3 years old when all of this happened. And in January of 2022, he was a student at Independence Middle School and 14 years old. You're going to hear on the 28th, he ran away from home. He was reported missing to the Jupiter Police Department, and that's where this case starts. You're going to hear from Jupiter Police Department officers who are going to tell you that they took the report of the missing child and that he didn't come home on the next day, on the 29th, and he also still was not located on the 30th. They went back to the Ferriter residence to find out if there was new information. Had he come home? Was there any leads? The day he left was a Friday, still wasn't there on Saturday, and on Sunday, Detective Sharp from the Jupiter Police Department went into the Ferriter home with Tracy Ferriter. You're going to hear it's at that point that for the very first time he learned about how he was living, about what his living situation was like at home with his parents. He's going to tell you that he was shown the house, and the first thing that stood out to him was that the child who they were looking for didn't have a place to sleep in the main house. There wasn't a bedroom for him, there weren't his items of clothes, there weren't his toys inside of the house. Instead, there was a structure, a small room, box-like structure that was constructed in the garage. that didn't have any windows. It had a box spring and a mattress, a bucket in the corner, and a desk. You're going to hear that at that point, the child still wasn't found, and so Detective Sharp left and continued the investigation. And the next day, which is Monday, January 31st, he shows up at his school. And there he is made secure, made safe by the Jupiter Police Department. And that's when the criminal investigation really starts, after they had the opportunity to speak to him. You're going to hear that as part of the investigation, during that initial walkthrough of the room, Detective Sharp realized that that small cell-like room had a ring camera in the corner to observe the occupant of the room. And so as part of his investigation, he served a search warrant to the Ring Corporation to see if they had maintained any videos. And you're going to get the opportunity to see and hear that evidence that was returned from the Ring Corporation, because that ring camera captured moment after moment of life in that room. You're going to hear over and over and over again that door locking and unlocking, because the evidence is going to show that that room was not a room that could come and go from as he pleased. He was locked inside from the outside over and over again. You're also going to see that he did not have the ability to control things like the lights in that room, that the only way that those lights could be controlled was outside the room. And so you're going to see him sitting in the dark in a windowless room for hours at a time. And we're not just talking from 10 p.m. till 7 o'clock in the morning overnight. You're going to see that even during the day, there are times in which his parents, the defendant and his wife, would turn off that light and leave their 14-year-old son locked in a room in the dark, alone, isolated. You're also going to get to observe and hear the anger and the derision, the physical altercations that this defendant has with his child on the Ring camera, physical intimidation and the threat to violence. You're also going to see having to use that bucket, having to pee in the bucket, because for hours overnight, he did not have access or the opportunity to go to the bathroom. And the only option for him was to pee in the bucket. And then you're going to see the next morning when that occurred, that this defendant would tell him, clean out the bucket, make sure the neighbors don't see you doing that. Because this treatment, his life, was kind of a secret thing. And you're going to hear that it's not the state's case, and it's not the evidence in this case, that he was kept in there 24 hours a day. He went to school. There were times where he was outside of the room with his family. There was times where he was shoveling shells for his father for hours at a time. But for long periods of time, for mass majority of this child's life in that period in Jupiter, Florida, he's in that room, isolated, alone, without autonomy, without privacy, without stimulation, sometimes with only a single book to read over and over again. As part of the evidence in this case, you're going to hear that the defendants are charged with that 4-week period, that 4 to 6 week period, because the family moved to Jupiter, Florida in December of 2021. Mid-December, kind of a week or two before Christmas, and this all happens at the end of January. So we're talking about 6 weeks when they are in Palm Beach County, Florida. And so that's the charged time period. That's the criminal conduct that we're talking about. But the state expects that you're going to hear evidence about Ronan's life before the family moved to Florida, when they lived in Arizona. We expect that you're going to hear testimony about a very similar, nearly identical room that the family constructed for him in Arizona, in which he had been residing in since he was 11 years old. You're going to hear that that room had no access to a bathroom, no control of the lights, no freedom of movement, that he was recorded. and that he was locked in from the outside with only a bucket to go to the bathroom. The charges in this case are aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. And at the end of this trial, Judge Coates is going to read you instructions about what the law is for child abuse in the state of Florida. And you're going to hear that there's child abuse and there's aggravated child abuse. Aggravated child abuse occurs when a defendant engages in malicious punishment of a child, willful torture, or the willful caging of a child. And those are in the alternative, meaning it could be any of them. And child abuse in the state of Florida means the intentional act that causes physical or mental harm or conduct that is likely to cause physical or mental harm. So that doesn't mean that there actually has to be harm. It's just that it's likely to cause harm, that they engaged in an act that is likely to harm a child. And to help you understand what the harm is here and how this conduct is criminal, the state is going to call a Dr. Wade Meyer. Dr. Meyer is a child psychiatrist. He's affiliated with Brown University, and he's going to tell you the impact that this kind of treatment has on a child, that it's humiliating, isolating, cruel, and malicious. He's going to tell you that it will cause harm to any child, but it will certainly cause harm. That harm could be exacerbated if that child already has a behavioral issue or has trauma. And you're going to hear about some of that in this case. It's true, and we'll admit that there are times that he did not follow the rules, that he made mistakes, and that he did things that his parents punished him for. But you're going to hear that in no circumstance is this a protective punishment for any child. And in particular, for a child who may have issues with trauma or a behavioral issue, that this is the worst possible thing that a parent could do. It is the exact opposite of any recommended treatment, of any therapeutic purpose, or anything that would lead to productive response from a child. Instead, Dr. Myers would tell you that it would increase the likelihood of behavioral issues. Because when you isolate a child like this, when you humiliate them, when you basically put them in solitary confinement for large portions of the day, that has a negative mental impact. At the end of this trial, Judge Coates will instruct you on the law, but I want to be very clear on a couple of things. The state here does not have to prove that every moment of his day they were committing a crime against her. We don't have to prove that there are no moments when he was let out of the room. That's not the state's case, and that's not what Dr. Myers is going to say is necessary to cause harm. We also don't have to prove, and you're not going to hear, that there's any kind of legal defense or special standard for a child that has behavioral issues. That if
Overruled.
the law, you're going to hear from Judge Coates. The law you're going to hear from Judge Coates is not going to be that there's any kind of affirmative defense or that there's any different standard just because a child has behavioral issues. We're here today because of the actions of Tim Ferriter towards his son. They were ongoing, they were intentional, and they were criminal. And so at the end of this trial, after you have heard all of the evidence, all of the testimony and the law from Judge Coates, we're going to ask you for the only verdict that is supported by the evidence and the law. And that's a verdict of guilty as charged. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Coakley. Is defense ready for an opening? Ms. Murad, you're going to handle it? You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is a parent's responsibility to make tough choices. Tough choices to protect their child, tough choices to protect their other children, and tough choices to protect the community. And that is what Tim Ferriter did. He was faced with an impossible situation. And he made tough choices to protect what we will call him throughout this trial from himself, from the other children in his home, and from the community. You only have to make one determination in this case, and that is whether or not Tim Ferriter had the criminal intent necessary. That's it. Did he or did he not have the criminal intent? And that will be your guiding question throughout this case. This case is not about whether or not Tim Ferriter made the right choice, because I will be the first to tell you, the defense will be the first to tell you that he did not. But what it is about is the difficulty of parenting, right? Because bad parenting does not make somebody a criminal. Bad parenting does not mean that a person should be charged with a crime. It makes them human. It makes them a parent who is trying to figure out, when faced with a child, as you'll hear throughout the trial, who has consistent and escalating behavioral issues, how to handle them. You will learn more throughout the trial, but I want to try in these next few minutes to share with you what that relationship looked like. In 2009, Tim Ferriter and his wife Tracy took the very long flight to Vietnam to adopt their first son. At that point, him and his wife Tracy had spent some time in the Honduras, and so they were really motivated to adopt. And the first child that they adopted, you will hear from in this trial, is Chinese. And after they were really excited to adopt again. And they wanted her to have a sibling that was culturally close to her. While they were waiting to get the news that they were going to be able to adopt from Vietnam, they had their first biological child. And within just a few years, they go from this young couple to a little family. They had 3 little babies. And this is really the first iteration of that family before it comes along several years later. Tim and Tracy loved these children.
Overruled.
They did everything that they could when they were young. Karate, softball, soccer. I was in track. He loved Legos. They got him science posters and galaxies. So he had a periodic table of elements and stuff about galaxies in his room because those were his interests. But what we don't know is how our stories will be written. We don't know where our children are going to end up. And as parents, all you can do is try to raise children who make good choices, who are going to be productive members of the community, and hope that that works. And unfortunately, it just couldn't. Later in this week, you will hear from a seasoned psychologist, Dr. Sheila Rappa. Dr. Rappa is well respected as a forensic psychologist. She's routinely hired by the state attorney's office. She is routinely court appointed to conduct psychological evaluations in this county, to give opinions about psychiatric or psychological expertise. And her specific experience is working with children like. And so that's what makes her uniquely qualified to speak with you about the records that she's reviewed and the patterns of behavior that she noticed. Underwent a neurological examination. And what it shows, and as Dr. Rappa will explain to you, is that neuropsychological evaluation showed elevated levels of a lack of inhibition and clinically elevated levels of a lack of emotional regulation. And as Dr. Rappa will explain to you, these elevated levels are associated with early life brain development, usually when someone's a baby, pre-verbal, or even in utero. And that makes sense because Dr. Rappa reviewed records, early childhood records, and what they show is that he had malnourishment, he was not well taken care of when he was dropped off at the orphanage and while he was there. We can't know his exact medical history because his biological mother just left him at the orphanage, but the records that Dr. Rappa has reviewed over the course of life, in addition to some of the depositions taken in this case, other records, they will show you that, for very much lack of a better term, is wired this way. It is a function of brain development. And it's why the Ferriters continued to see patterns of behavior that would not stop. I want to take you through some of those patterns. Since he was a kid and had aggressive outbursts and tantrums.
Overruled for purposes of open.
His parents regularly received emails of him fighting at school, punching other kids, using profanity. Tim and Tracy moved, well, let me start with this. He was at a school with his sister where he pretended that a teacher asked him to make an announcement in class. So he was in a different class. He goes into class and says, oh, the teacher asked me to make an announcement. He has his sister stand up and humiliates her in front of the entire class, saying that she's a horrible person. And it was so disturbing to the teacher who was present, who you'll hear from throughout this trial, that she had to report it. Tim and Tracy moved to an accelerated private school in hopes that the challenging work would engage him. It was sort of a math and science type school, so they thought that that would help him stop. It did not. He stood up in class at that school and asked if the Holocaust was a good thing. He was accused of telling a student that they should get aborted. He got up in class and said that immigrants are more likely to be drug dealers. He brought a screwdriver to class and was waving it in someone's face. He stole another student's laptop, hacked into it, and looked up women getting run over by trains.
Sustained.
And he pretended to be a tutor to a friend of his.
Sustained.
And that happened while he was in a
Counsel
marriage.
approach.
To a friend of his.
Sustained.
And that happened while he was in a
Counsel
marriage.
approach.
Excuse me. I don't know, maybe I'm on second thought. Maybe he isn't as stoic as I think. He does look a little nervous there, in my opinion.
All right, Ms. Murad, you may continue.
Also pretended to be a tutor to one of his friends and then stole her father's credit card and utilized it.
Overruled as to that.
Thank you, Judge. This is just a handful of the consistent and escalating behaviors we continued to engage in. And he himself will tell you, as the state said in their opening, that he knows that things are wrong, and he continues to do them. He knows that there are consequences, and he continues to do them. And all this time, Tim and Tracy are racking their brains trying to figure out what will change his behaviors. Because they have an entire family here, right? These kids go to school, they have their own activities, they have a toddler at one point. They have to be able to get through the day-to-day of just being an adult and having a family, be able to send their child to school safely, knowing that other children will remain safe. So they try to get him into activities to kind of take out his energy. And when they see that's not working, they do counseling. They give him the medications that he's prescribed. They try to help him sleep at night because he keeps wandering the house. They cut sugar from his diet on the recommendation of a pediatrician, that maybe that'll help his behavior, and that'll make him less impulsive. This family is going from place to place to place, from appointment to appointment, trying to figure out how to get this child actual help, how to get a diagnosis, and how to get medication that will change his behavior. And as we discussed in voir dire together, what they found was a revolving door of doctors and therapists, and no one was able to offer them the help that they needed. You will see that Tim tried to curtail behavior when nothing else worked, and there will be some videos of that. It's not always going to look pretty, just as it doesn't look pretty in real life when a parent gets mad at their kid. Particularly a child, and you must remember when you see the videos, particularly a child who for years and years and years is continuing to engage in these behaviors, who will not stop. In 2019, while living in Havasu, Arizona, Tracy and Tim had their last and youngest child. And at that point, they are fearful. Are a little bit older. They're about 10, 11 years old. And this is coming in as an infant. And at this point, he had been hurting other kids at school. He had been engaging in dangerous behaviors. He's walking around at night. And they did not know if an infant could be safe with him in the house. And that is when they made the decision, while he lived inside their home in Arizona, this is not in the garage, this is in a house, to put a lock on his door. And that was not for the purpose of keeping him locked inside at all times. It was not for the purpose of even punishment. It was for the purpose of monitoring him when they couldn't. Because unfortunately, they're in a situation where they cannot leave this child unattended. There has to be somebody constantly watching him, and they cannot do that as two working adults. You'll hear that he participated in activities, he went to school, you'll see videos of him around the house, and he will tell you himself that the door was not always locked. But they did use it when he couldn't be supervised. Once was born, they needed a baby room. So they built a room in the Arizona house, in the garage. It had a bed, it had a desk, it had Legos. You'll hear from witnesses who actually saw that room and showed it to them. Took them in and said, hey, look at my room, and showed them all the toys that he had and the books that he had in the room in Arizona. So right before Christmas of 2021, that's when we get to sort of the time relevant in this case. The Ferriters moved back to Jupiter, where they lived many, many years ago when the kids were young. And they decided to build a similar room. It had the bed, desk, books, and toys. You'll see videos of him in his room. He's reading. He's talking to his friends. He has Legos there. He is not allowed to have technology in his room alone because that's not something that they felt was safe, but he had other types of activities. He did have like a school Chromebook that was provided by the school. You'll see him FaceTiming with a friend of his. He had posters up on the wall that he, when he got angry, ripped down himself. That's why the walls will look bare. Both the room in Arizona and the one in Florida had one very big design flaw, and that is that it did not include a bathroom. And this means that at night, when he was in the room and couldn't be supervised, had to use a bucket for the bathroom if he needed to use the bathroom. During the day, he was permitted to move about the house freely, and he could utilize the bathroom in the house itself. And I'm going to be very honest with you. You're going to see him use the bathroom in that bucket a handful of times over this 4 to 5 week period. He's a kid, so he's not waking up and using the bathroom all the time like probably all of us are. And so he uses it a few times, and it's not going to look pretty. But what you have to remember throughout this case, right, is that this was not some big secret life like the state is presenting. These people went to doctors. They went to therapists. The schools were emailing them back and forth about his behavior. They had family members and friends see the room in Arizona. In Florida, they were only here for about 4 weeks right before Christmas, and then school started. So this is not some sort of secret life that they had for... Everybody knew that had a behavioral issue. Everybody knew that Tim and Tracy were trying to get a diagnosis so that he could get appropriate help, and it never happened. As you review the evidence in this case, you have to remember that the issue at hand is not whether or not Tim Ferriter is a great dad. It is not whether Tim Ferriter did what you would have done, and it's not even if Tim Ferriter did the right thing, because our own expert, Dr. Rappa, will say that he did not, and that those actions could have been damaging to the child. That does not make his actions a crime. The singular question in this case is whether or not there was criminal intent. Because what Tim did not do is have his child arrested, not one time. What he did not do is undergo a failed adoption proceeding where you essentially return a child back to the Department of Children and Families.
Sustained.
He paid...
Sustained.
Okay.
No need to approach. I sustain the objection.
He paid for private schools so that he could have activities that he was engaged in. But he had to make tough choices to protect his son, to protect the other kids in his home, and to protect the community from a child who was already showing, a screwdriver in class, hitting other kids. He had to do that. And though he didn't handle it correctly, his intentions were not criminal. Dr. Rappa will testify, based on her extensive experience and review of the records, that what she sees in this case is not malicious. That what she sees in this case is actually very common for parents with children who have such extensive behavioral issues that are hard to sort of diagnose and pinpoint. At the end of this trial, I'm going to come back up here, after which I expect to do about a week of evidence. And I'm going to ask you to really listen to what he says, even in his own testimony. And that you consider what it's like, and that you consider how a parent will
Sustained.
how a parent has to act in these situations. The difficulty that Tim Ferriter experienced over and over and over again. The help that he attempted to give his child over and over and over again. I'm going to ask that you find him out.
All right, thank you, Ms. Murad. Ms. Coakley, stay ready to call its first witness.
Okay, so there were both of the opening statements. And, excuse me for bumping that. There's, the defense they have quite a job to do. So I can admire them doing their job. There was one thing that bugged me, though, that the attorney said. And obviously we know, we are already made aware of that the boy does have a lot of problems and raises a lot of concerns for family, friends, teachers, whomever. But when she said that when the baby was born, they needed a room for the baby, so they built a place for the boy downstairs, which was really basically the box with no windows and a bucket, which she did admit, the defense, that it was not a great thing to do. But it was almost like, oh, well, the baby came, so we're going to we're going to displace you and put you down there in the basement, or in the garage, I should say. My question is, temporarily, why wouldn't they just go ahead and keep the newborn, the infant, in the room with the parents for a little while, and it would give them more time to figure out what to do? I mean, they could lock their room from the inside. I don't know. I just feel like there was other things that just made me feel a little bit sad. I mean, if the boy is already suffering all this mental disorder things and maybe feeling badly, it just feels like he got tossed to the garage. That's just my opinion, though. Keep that in mind. Everyone's entitled to form their own opinion, but for whatever reason, that bugged me. Really bugged me. But okay, so now I've skipped over because I really want to keep your interest in this trial because, like I said, he hasn't had his sentencing yet, and Tracy hasn't gone on trial. I think there's still so much to unpack here. But anyhow, I'm going to jump to the son, the victim's testimony. He is there in person, but the cameras are not on him. But let's go on and go with it.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, ma'am.
All right, Ms. Coakley, you may begin at your convenience.
Can you please tell the jury your name?
My name is...
What's your middle name? Do you sometimes go by
Yes.
among your friends and your family?
Yes.
Okay. How old are you?
16.
What's your date of birth?
2007 by the Vietnamese government.
Is that where you're originally from?
Yes.
Approximately how old were you when you came to the United States?
1.5 years old. I came here in February of 2009.
And how did you end up coming here?
I was adopted by Tracy and Tim Ferriter.
Okay. And you came, and then that's when you came for the first time into the United States?
Yes.
Now today, what grade are you in?
10th.
In school, what kind of classes are your favorite right now?
Math and science.
Okay. What kind of math classes are you taking?
AP calculus.
Okay. What about science?
AP chemistry for the final arts.
And so you have that big AP test at the end of the year?
Yes.
Do you know what we're here to talk about?
Yes.
Okay. Is this something? How do you feel about having to come in here and talk about this?
Apathetic.
Okay. Do you feel nervous at all?
Not really.
Is this something you like to talk about?
No.
Do you feel relieved about talking about it?
As I said, I don't have any feelings about it.
So you kind of told us that you came to the United States when you were adopted. I want to talk about who was in your family when you were younger. Okay, you said Tim and Tracy Ferriter were your parents?
Yes.
Did you have any siblings when you were younger?
Yes.
Tell us who your siblings were.
My siblings were
Okay. Where do you fall in the age range of your siblings?
second oldest.
Okay, who's older than you? And then was next?
Yes.
And then the youngest child?
Yes.
So how far apart are you and...
Is 2 years older than me, is 1 year younger than me, and is 10 years younger than me.
Okay, so how old were you when he was born?
11 or 12.
Okay. Does it sound... when was he born? February?
He was born in February of... Yeah.
Yeah. Around the 2017-ish? Is that right? Or am I wrong? What grade were you in?
I was in 5th grade.
Okay, you were in 5th grade, so you were in elementary school about the time that he was born.
Yes.
Okay. So 10, 11, around that age?
Yes.
Now, in school, were you close in grade to any of your siblings?
My sister was 2 grades above me,
Which
Fiona,
sister is that?
one grade below me, and not applicable because he's not in school yet.
Now, I want to talk about what your family life was like when you lived in Florida. How many times did your family live in Florida?
Twice.
Twice. When was the first time?
When I was first adopted until we moved to Arizona.
Okay. How old were you approximately when you moved to Arizona?
I just finished 3rd grade.
Okay, so you're in Arizona, you were in Florida until the 3rd grade.
Yes.
And then in the 3rd grade is when you first were in Arizona.
Yes.
How long did you stay in Arizona for?
I stayed in Arizona for about 4 years.
Okay.
Until halfway through 8th grade.
Okay. So Arizona is 3rd grade through halfway through the 8th grade year.
Yes.
Okay. And so the first time you were in Florida, you were real young, like small elementary school age.
Repeat the question.
Is it fair to say that the first time you were in Florida, you were very young? It was young elementary school age.
Yes.
And then Arizona was elementary school and the very beginning of middle school.
I was there until my middle year of 8th grade.
Until the middle of 8th grade. And then you moved back to Florida.
Yes.
And so when you moved to Florida the second time, you were in the middle of 8th grade. How old were you? It's about 14 years old, seem right?
Yes.
Now, when you moved back to Florida, what time of year was that?
Somewhere in December.
Okay. So somewhere in December of the middle of your 8th grade year.
When I moved to Florida.
When you moved to Florida the second time.
Yes.
And where in Florida, like which town did you move to?
I moved to Jupiter.
And is that where your family's house was in Jupiter?
Yes.
And so did your whole family move with you?
Yes.
And what school did you start at?
I started at Independence Middle School.
Is that a school in Jupiter?
It's a school in Jupiter.
Was it close to your house?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about kind of how your family was run with Tim and Tracy, the defendants. Who was the person in your family who was in charge of setting the rules?
Tim.
Okay. Who was the person in your family that was in charge of deciding kind of what kind of punishment you would get?
Tim.
And who was the one that kind of decided how you would be treated, the person in charge?
Tim.
Now, did Tracy also go along with and support what Tim did?
Yes.
Was it an option for you if you disagreed with a rule or if you wanted to discuss the way you were being treated? Was that something that you could have a discussion with the defendant, Tim?
No.
Now, talk to me about when you moved to Florida. What was the house like?
The house when I moved back to Florida in 2021.
Yes, December 2021.
Yes.
Yeah. How was the house like?
So, the house had a 2-car garage. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 office, and 2 bathrooms. And we also had 2 living rooms and a backyard.
Okay. Tell us who had the bedrooms? Who had what bedroom?
I had a bedroom and had the office as a room, and Tim and Tracy had a room together.
Okay. I want to talk to you for a second about something that's already been entered into evidence and see if you recognize or we can talk about some of these photographs, okay?
Okay.
Permission to approach, Your Honor, what's already been entered into evidence as states 3A through C.
Granted.
Okay, so I'm showing you this is already in evidence. The jury's already seen it. States 3A through C. Do you recognize what room we're looking at?
Yes.
Which room is that?
It is his room.
Okay. Now, in these pictures, there's like some mattresses on the floor in this room. Is that what it was like when you were living there?
No.
Were those mattresses on there?
No.
In the floor? Do you know where those mattresses were?
That mattress was in either, if it's an inflatable mattress, it was in storage or in my room. if it was an actual mattress, it would come from my room.
Now, you mentioned that there was. Thank you. You mentioned that I had a room.
Yes.
Had a room. Your parents had a room, and had the office.
Yes.
Where did you sleep?
I slept in an 8x8 room in the garage.
Okay. Was that room built into the garage?
It was built inside the garage.
Inside the garage?
Yes.
Who built that? Or who had it built?
Timothy hired a contractor to build it in December of 2021.
Okay, and how do you know that?
Because I was kept in their closet and I overheard the conversation of them having to build it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to approach something that has been entered into evidence already as States 9. Okay?
You may approach, and you can approach freely.
I'm showing you what's already been entered into evidence as States 9. What does that show?
This shows the room.
So is this a picture of the garage from the outside?
Yes.
And then in there, can you see the back wall of the room?
Yes.
Is that the room that you're talking about, defendant's home in Jupiter?
Yes.
I want to talk about what it was like in that room. You said it was about 8x8.
Yes.
Did it have a concrete floor, or what was the floor like?
So, the floor was concrete, but I used these little 16 by 16 inch mats of carpet to put down on the floor, so it wasn't so hard.
Okay, so it had a concrete floor, but on top there was a carpet laid on top of it.
Yes.
What kind of furniture did you have in that room?
I had a desk and a bed.
Did the bed have a bed frame, or what was it like?
The bed had no frame, had no box spring. It was just a mattress on the floor.
Okay. And mattress on the floor, what size of mattress was it?
Size of the mattress was a twin size.
Now, did the room have any windows or any outside light?
No, it only had an air conditioner.
Okay. Let's talk about that air conditioner for a second. Were you allowed to touch or operate the air conditioner?
No.
Were you allowed to turn it on if you were hot or turn it off if you were too cold?
No.
Would you get in trouble if you touched the air conditioner at all?
Yes.
And who did that direction come from?
Tim.
Did the room have any lights?
It had a light, but it was controlled outside the room.
Okay, so if you wanted to turn on the light, is that something that you could do when you were inside the room?
No.
Did you have any control over when the lights were on or when the lights were off? Who controlled that?
My parents, Tim or Tracy.
Okay. Were there times that you were in the room in the dark?
Yes.
Is that at night sometimes?
Yes, and also during the day.
Okay, so there are periods of time during the day where you would be there in the dark, in the room.
Yes.
What was it like in the room when the lights were off?
It was pitch black. You couldn't see anything.
Would you have to feel your way around to see what's going on? Now, did the room have a bathroom or access to the bathroom?
It had a bucket for my urine and feces, but that was basically it.
Okay, so if you were in the room and you were closed in there and you had to use the bathroom, what was your only option?
Use the bucket.
Now I want to talk about the time frame in Florida. While you were in there, were there times where you were locked in the room, unable to leave, and had to use the bathroom?
Yes.
And did you use the bucket in the corner of the room in order to relieve yourself?
Yes.
Now in Florida, did you ever have to use that bucket for feces?
No.
But did you have to use it to urinate?
Yes.
What about previously? We'll talk about it a little bit more depth. When you were in Arizona, did you ever have to use the bucket for Arizona for feces?
Yes.
Did you have to use it for urine?
Yes.
Because you had to urinate in the room on occasion. How was did the room smell at all?
Yes.
How did it smell?
Uh,
I mean, was it bad?
Putrid. Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about whether or not, was there a camera in the room?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of what was happening with the camera?
So the camera was a Ring camera. It had two-way communication, but the communication from the person viewing the camera to the person that is being supervised by the camera was separated by the click of a button on the phone or any device you can to watch the video.
So the person outside the room watching on the Ring camera could talk to you inside the room?
Yes, by the click of a button.
So they would have to click on something in order to hear them. And they could also potentially hear what you would say.
Yes.
Were there times that the defendants in this case, Tim and Tracy Ferriter, were there times that they spoke to you only through the camera?
Yes.
Now, we talked a little bit about the room, but tell me about the door. How was the room? Could you come and go from that room as you pleased?
No.
Tell me how it was.
So, the door in Florida?
In Florida.
All right, the door in Florida of December of 2021.
To January of 2022, yes.
Yes. It had a normal lock on the handle and a deadbolt also.
Okay. Which side of the door was the normal lock on the handle?
The outside of the room.
Okay. And what about the deadbolt?
Also outside the room.
So when you were inside the room, were you able to open the door if it was locked?
No.
Okay. Did that happen? Were you locked inside of the room?
Yes.
Was that most of the time you were in the room it was locked?
Yes.
Now, when you were in the room, were you always given access to water when you were locked inside the room?
I received water occasionally, but not at a regular basis.
Okay. So there are times when you're given a cup or a water bottle to have in the room.
Yes.
But there are also occasions when you're locked inside the room without anything to drink.
Yes.
Okay. And what about food? Did you ever eat any of your meals in the room?
I ate a majority of my meals in the room.
If you were in the room and you didn't have any food at that time and you were hungry, did you have the ability to get additional food?
No.
Is that something you were allowed to do, to go in the kitchen and get a snack or get additional food if you were hungry?
No.
If you did that, what would happen?
I would get.
Did you get punished?
Yes.
Ronan, did you like being in that room?
No.
Did you want to be in the room?
No.
How did it make you feel?
To me, being locked in a room, it's dehumanizing. It's almost as bad as genocide. It's saddening to abuse a child that was just acting like a child, never thinking of what an adult would think to do to a child that would succumb his or her efforts in daily life to succeed. Suffering from emotional pain, suffering, trauma.
So, did you have a choice about whether or not to go in that room? Like, were you forced
Yes.
by Tim and Tracy Ferriter to go into the room?
Yes.
If you resisted or, didn't follow their directions, what would happen?
I would be put in the room by physical force.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about, so the period that we're really talking about here is about a 5 or 6 week period in December 2021 to January, the end of January 2022, right? So I want to talk about what the majority of your life was like in that room in Florida. And just so we're clear, when you moved from Arizona, was the room there and ready for you?
Yes.
So you never stayed anywhere else in the house?
No, the room was not ready for me in Arizona, but it was ready for me in Florida.
In Florida, I'm so sorry. When you came from Arizona to Florida, the room had already been finished being specially constructed for you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about kind of what your typical school day was like during that time period. All right. Typically, just on average, what time of the day would you be woken up?
I'd be woken up around 6:30 to 7 o'clock.
And how would you be woken up? Like, how would it be wake up time? Did you have an alarm clock? Would you naturally wake up? How would that happen?
Tim and Tracy would unlock my door.
Okay, so someone would come in?
Yes.
Would your lights have been off and you be in the dark
Yes.
before that? At that point, would you be given the opportunity to go to the bathroom?
Yes.
If you had to use the bucket at that point, or sometime during the previous night, what would happen?
I would dump it into the bushes behind the house.
Now, you said that you would wake up sometime between 6, they would wake you up on average between 6 and 7 in the morning.
Yes.
You would get to go to the bathroom. What would happen when you were done going to the bathroom?
I would be put back in my room or doing household chores around the house.
When you were put back into the room, would you be locked in?
Yes.
And at this point, would you get dressed for school?
Yes.
Where were your clothes kept?
Outside the room.
And so when we say outside the room, like in the garage,
Yes.
would you get breakfast?
Occasionally, yes.
Okay. So were there times, some of those days, that they didn't give you breakfast?
Yes.
But were there also lots of days where they did in fact give you breakfast?
It wasn't a lot. It was probably 50-50.
Okay. When you would get breakfast, would that be out in the kitchen with the rest of the family, or where would it be?
It would be either outside or in my room.
Okay. And when you say outside, you mean outside the house?
Yes.
When it was in the room, what typically would you get for breakfast?
Peanut butter and bread and a fruit or something.
Okay, fruit, like something like a banana?
Yes.
And so when you say peanut butter and bread, do you mean just like peanut butter on 2 slices of bread?
Yes.
And those would be brought into your room?
Yes.
And you would have it in the room?
Yes.
Would that be the breakfast almost every day? Or would there be variation?
I'll be the same breakfast every single day.
Now, what would you, while you're eating breakfast in the room, would you have to have anything to do in the room, or what would be happening before you go to school?
I had a sleeve of books and textbooks, but that's all I had.
Okay. Would there sometimes you do homework in the morning?
Yes.
What time approximately, so would you be in the room from the time you got let out at 6 and 7 in the morning until it was time to leave for school?
Yes.
What time approximately do you leave for school?
9 o'clock.
And then you get to school?
Yes.
And school's pretty close, right?
Yes.
And so you did, in fact, attend Independence Middle School while you were here in Jupiter, Florida.
Yes.
Now, at school, would you get lunch?
No, I brought lunch.
Who made that lunch?
Tracy.
And what would be in that lunch?
A plain peanut butter sandwich. Either some sort of chips and a fruit.
Would you be allowed to, if you wanted to buy extra snacks at school?
No.
Were you allowed to have any more snacks than what was given to you in your lunch?
No.
Were you allowed to buy a school lunch?
No.
Did you want snacks?
Yes.
Did the other kids at school have snacks?
Yes.
Is that something that was kind of hard for you? That to see other kids getting snacks and not being able to have them?
Yes.
Now, what time approximately would school be over?
3 o'clock.
And what time would you get home from school?
Around 3:30.
And then when you would get home from school on most days, what would happen?
I'd be put back into my room.
And when you say put back into the room, are you locked in the room?
Yes.
And would you have been allowed to leave the room during that time?
Would
you be allowed, or did I confuse you? Yeah. Did you have the choice if you wanted to say sit in the living room and watch TV after school? Is that something that you could do?
No.
Could you be in the house? In the main house?
No.
Now, so you get back around 3:30, and then how long do you stay in the room in the afternoon?
On most days until 7 o'clock or dinner time.
Would you eat dinner in the room or with the family?
In the room.
And are there some times on occasion that you would be allowed to eat dinner with the family?
Yes.
Most of the time, though, where were you eating dinner?
In my room.
And when you're eating dinner in the room, are you locked in the room?
Yes.
Are you, did they ever let you out before bed to go to the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay. Would that be kind of right before you went to bed?
Yes.
Sustain, rephrase.
When would you usually be let out to go to the bathroom? At the end of the day?
Like when Tim and Tracy go to bed, which is around 9, 10 o'clock.
And after you're let out to go to the bathroom at night, what happened next?
I was locked into my room.
And then throughout the night, are you locked in the room?
Yes.
Now, when the defendants would go to bed, what happened with the lights?
The lights were off or on.
Now, in the room, I want to talk about we talked about what furniture you had. At some points during this time frame, did you have other things in the room?
Well, I had my small selection of toys and just books.
Okay, so books, toys, some
Yes.
toys. At some point, did some of those items get taken out of the room?
Yes.
And then you said that you had books and toys. Was there a point where you only had books?
Yes.
Did those books eventually, some of them, get taken away?
Yes.
And how many books were you kind of left with?
Like 2 or 3 textbooks.
Were you allowed to have electronics in the room?
No.
Go ahead.
Rephrase that. The only electronic allowed in my room was my school computer.
Were you allowed to in with you at all times?
No.
Just when you were doing schoolwork?
Yes.
When you had your school computer, were you allowed to play computer games on it at all ever?
No.
Is that something that a lot of middle school kids do?
Yes.
Is that something that kids would talk about doing at school?
Yes.
Did you want to play games on your computer?
Yes.
Now, we talked a little bit about the lights being off at night. Were there times where the lights were off during the day?
Yes.
And approximately when that would happen, how long would that go on for? Like, would it be for 5 minutes or would it be for longer than that?
We'll be around for a couple hours.
Now, I want to talk about other times in Florida. Were there times in Florida where you were in fact outside of the house?
Yes.
Or inside the house itself?
Yeah, there were times where I was inside the house.
There were some occasions where you were allowed to be in the living room.
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Or in the kitchen with the rest of the family?
Usually I was just in the living room doing chores, or in the kitchen also doing chores.
Now, was there time in Florida where you were outside of the house?
Yes.
What would you be doing outside of the house, mostly?
Raking leaves, moving shells. Yeah.
Now, when you were outside of the house, are you under the direct supervision of your parents, or are you kind of out there by yourself?
They had a camera to watch me, but it was another Ring camera. But otherwise, I was not supervised while I was outside.
So you'd be outside of the house by yourself for periods of time?
Yes.
Now, were there a couple occasions where maybe you did get to play or interact with your siblings outside?
Yeah.
But for the most part, when you were outside, what were you having to do?
Yard work, chores.
And could you, when you were doing the yard work or the chores, if you got hot or you needed a drink of water, were you allowed to just go in the house and get those things?
No.
Were there times where the front door was locked and you couldn't get in?
Yes.
What would you have to do in that circumstance? Would you just
Yes,
have to wait outside or something
I had to
else?
wait outside.
Okay, until they decide to let you in?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about in Florida, were there instances where the defendant in this case, Tim Ferriter, acted toward you in a way that was physically aggressive?
Repeat the question.
Was there ever any physical aggression toward you in Florida?
There was instances of grabbing and pushing, but otherwise, no physical contact such as punching, hitting, smacking.
Right, that none of that happened during the time frame in Florida.
No.
Were there times where he was verbally aggressive to you in Florida?
Yes.
What kind of things would he say to you?
It would say, "This is a piece of
You can spell it.
SHIT. You better, you better pick it up." Yeah.
Would he call you names?
No.
Would he yell at you?
Yes.
Would he scream at you?
Yes.
Did it appear to you, based on how he was interacting with you, that he was angry at you?
Yes.
And is the same true for Tracy?
No.
Now, because of his verbal aggression, did you have a belief as to whether or not he could, if you didn't listen to him, or if that there was a risk, or that were you concerned that he would be physically aggressive to you?
I could safely assume that he could cause bodily harm to me.
Overruled.
And is that based on some of your prior experiences in Arizona?
Yes.
Overruled.
Now, I want to talk about Arizona now. Okay, that's where you lived immediately prior to coming to Florida. We ended up talking about Florida, about times where you were outside and couldn't come in the house. Did that happen in Arizona as well?
Yes.
Were you locked outside?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I had to move rocks and stones and shrubs and cactus around the lawn, but I was unable to go inside to eat or get water.
Now, in Arizona initially, when I think we said that you moved there in early elementary school.
Yes.
You said, I think, around 3rd grade.
Yes.
Initially there, did you have a room inside the house?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me how the rooms were initially when you moved to Arizona.
So, do you want to describe the room?
Yeah.
All right. The room had a desk, it had a dresser. It even once had a coffee table for me to play chess, and it had a bed with a mattress, box spring, bed frame. Yeah. And
Is that your room inside the house?
yes.
Okay. And during that time frame is born at that point?
No.
When, at some point in Arizona, did they build a different room-like structure for you in the garage?
Yes.
And the defendant's the one that had that built?
Yes.
When approximately did you end up having to go into the garage room?
About a week before it was born.
Okay. And you said that's about when you were in the 5th grade?
Yes.
Okay, so around 11 years old. And there, prior though, when you were in the room in the house, was that room, the room in the house, ever locked?
Yes.
Was it locked from the outside? So in the room, when you were in the room in the house, were there times when you couldn't leave or go into the room when you wanted? In the house in Arizona?
Yes.
Did that room have access to a bathroom?
No.
Now, I want to talk about the room in the garage in Arizona. Was that room similar to the room that you lived in Jupiter, Florida?
Yes.
Tell me about that room.
So, it had a bed frame, a box spring, and a mattress. It had a desk.
Did it have any windows?
No windows. Just there was a wall-mounted AC conditioner, and it also had a dresser, which was removed from the room at later stages.
Were you allowed to touch or utilize the air conditioner?
No.
In Arizona? Did it sometimes get hot?
Yes.
And did that room have a bathroom?
No.
Did it have the bucket that you already told us about?
Yes.
How did that room smell?
Bad.
In Arizona, you kind of gave us your average day here in Florida. Was it similar to the amount of time that you were in the room in Arizona?
Yes.
Were there times in Arizona that you were in the room for longer periods of time?
Yes.
About how long would you say is the longest?
About 18 hours.
And were there times where you didn't get meals in that room in Arizona?
Yes.
Would that happen for like the whole day, or would just a meal or two, or explain to us how it was?
Reset.
When you wouldn't get meals, how would that happen? What would that be like? Would it be every meal, or give us some context?
I had a fluctuating frequency. Sometimes I got all 3 meals. Sometimes I only got 1. Sometimes I only got 2. Yeah.
Now, were there times that the family went to events or out of the house and you were alone, locked in the room?
Yes.
Does that happen in Florida too?
Yes.
Now, in Arizona, we talked about the fact that there was some physical aggression in Florida, but there wasn't physical punishment. In Arizona, was there physical aggression from Tim Ferriter towards you?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
One time, I got smacked in the face.
Okay. Do you ever grab you by the neck or push you against the wall, anything like that?
Yeah, he did that.
Sustained, rephrase.
Tell me about some other instances besides getting smacked in the face.
He would grab me by the neck. He would grab my arm. He would, yeah.
Was there ever instances of physical punishment in Arizona?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
So, he had Tim had a jump rope. He used me for, punishment and also a belt.
Okay, and when you say a jump rope or a belt, what would he do with those?
Spank me with them.
Okay, he hit you with them?
Yes.
Where in the house would you be when that happened?
In my room.
Okay, who else would be in there?
No one else.
So just you and the defendant?
Yes.
Would the defendant be saying anything to you? Would there be yelling or anything like that?
There'll be a lot of yelling, yes.
And did it seem like he was angry at you during these?
Yes.
Now, during the course of your childhood, your time in the time we were talking about in Arizona and also in Florida, did you ever see any of your sisters get punished?
No.
Would they be punished or treated in the same way that you were for the same type of conduct?
No.
What was the difference?
They got their phones taken away for like a day or 2.
And what would happen to you?
I would get locked in my room. Yeah.
Your Honor, if I can just have a second?
You may.
Clarify, going back to Florida, when you are in that structure that they built in the garage, are you physically able to leave or escape? Like without, just normally, are you able to escape?
Sustained, rephrase, counsel.
Were you able to open the door from the inside?
Overruled.
You can answer the question, that means.
I totally forgot the question.
Yeah, it's okay. Were you able to open the door from the inside when it was locked?
If I had a key, no, but I didn't know.
But did you have a key?
No.
Did you have any way to get out of the room once they locked you inside?
I devised a couple of plans, but I didn't.
Right. Were any of those plans have worked?
It was one time where I stuck a Lego piece in the pin for the door, but I kind of realized that wasn't deep enough.
So there wasn't a way immediately available. Was there a way immediately available for you to be able to leave that room? No. That's all the questions I have.
All right, Cross.
Okay, I am going to stop here for today, and in the next video we will pick up with the cross exam from the defense. But just a few things that I picked up from this was, when I heard the boy, I guess we can legit call him the victim, speak, I was very surprised with how intelligently he spoke. AP Calculus, AP Chemistry. I mean, just the words he used were very sophisticated, very intelligent. Now, I don't deny that I'm sure he had problems. It's just, I guess I'm still blown away by the fact that, there wasn't something that could be done. I mean, I know that the defense attorney in her opening statement talked about the revolving door of doctors and psychiatrists and medications, but I don't know, I could be wrong. But when I heard the testimonies, I'm not sure that they did do a lot of that. I could be wrong, and that's why we're going to play it. But I'm just like, so they talked about at the beginning how he was malnourished as an infant. So my question is, why the hell did he get deprived of food? Now, I understand they were cutting back on sugar, but peanut butter on bread? And then how about hydration? Water? It didn't sound like he got a lot of water. Mattress on the floor. The bucket. Look, I've been camping before in a little tiny area with a bucket. I have finally figured out, though, what works for the dreadful odors that we leave, and that is horse pellets. And it actually does a beautiful job, but I don't believe that this young man was given any horse pellets or anything. Could you imagine being in that enclosed area? I'm just stating things that I'm thinking about as I go along, and not being able to use the AC, it getting stuffy, the lights and the door all being on the outside. I might just play this because I think the sound is off while I'm talking. But I just, that just kind of blows me away. It's just like, I don't see how not being in control of the lights, not being in control of the door, and if he's left alone when they're all going, what if there's a fire? Isn't that like wouldn't that be a terrible, terrible fire hazard? I mean, I would panic if I had locks on the outside of where I was staying in such an enclosed area with no windows, no air. I mean, there's no way it could have helped him. And I mean, I get it that, I mean, there were things like, I know he waved the screwdriver, I know he stole and, looked up terrible things on the website. But the whole thing about the teacher allowing him to come in and make an announcement. Number one, in covering lots of classes, I would have questioned why the student was in there. I would have said, number one, where's your pass? Did a teacher give you permission? What teacher? I mean, I'm not saying that's just a small item there, but, I don't get it. I don't, things don't, and when he went outside, he didn't even really get to actively play. He was doing chores, or if he was let out, he was doing chores in the house or in the kitchen. It was always, I know he was always talking about shoveling shells or something in the yard. I guess there were shells that he moved, but it just, I don't know, that just blows me away. However, though, we'll get a chance to hear from the defense questioning him. And I don't know, and then having that camera on him all the time, to me, it just seemed like he was put in this place. It's kind of like he was being observed like an animal in captivity. That just seems really inhumane to me. That seems horrible. And like I said, I don't know, there's a good chance maybe they did do everything they could. I understand the frustrations. My son gave me a hard time, a really hard time. And we deal with kids every day that have, behavioral issues, mental disorders, all that kind of stuff. But there's got to be a better solution than that. Nothing about that seemed good. Oh my gosh, there was one thing I almost completely forgot to add to my thoughts on this. And probably most of you all noticed it, but in case you didn't pick up on it, it was around the 55-38 mark, somewhere starting there. He was talking about prior to moving to Florida that he had overheard them talking to a contractor about constructing the same type of box in the home in Jupiter, Florida. And the attorney asked, how did he know that? And he said, I was kept in their closet and I overheard the conversation. So did he stay in their closet part of the time too? I mean, I guess it's better than being down in the garage, but also if he heard them talking about the construction of his, to me, it was like a prison, his box, because it has no windows, being constructed. What else did he overhear that maybe he shouldn't have? I mean, I think psychologically it has to be horrible for him what he experienced. And again, I'm not saying they didn't have a challenge, but you know what? I'm sorry, the child, in my opinion, and apparently according to the jury, it was not good. It was not good. But I don't know, that blew me away too. But so I'm just curious of what you all think about it. What would you do with a difficult child? Look, none of us are perfect parents, nor am I, but I'm just like, I just don't see where putting them, literally holding them prisoner and making them go in a bucket and withholding water and some food and just, I don't know, it's just a very demeaning thing to do, I believe. That's my opinion, though. Just remember, it's my opinion. But apparently the jury agreed. Anyhow, all right. Well, thank you all so much for watching, commenting, subscribing. And I really think this is worth sticking with because, like I said, the sentencing is going to be on the 16th, and then Tracy will have to go on trial. It'll be interesting to see if she decides to throw Timothy under the bus. And plus, we will see how he's doing in jail. And that's it for now. Don't forget, I love you all. Be kind to one another. Be kind to you. And I will see you the next time.